Hey, welcome to another episode of the Twisted, Bent, and Exhausted Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Jeff Harrison, along with
Leslie Spoor. Hi, hi.
Hey, Leslie. I'm excited about today because we're going to talk about things that, quite honestly, it for the average entrepreneur, it might seem boring and tedious, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, before you put any sticks up building a house, you better have a really strong foundation. And I think that's where you excel. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat today when it comes to
Oh, okay.
policies, procedures, and organizational skills. And really, those are the pillars of success for a business. Is that wrong?
No, that's right. That's totally right. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. So my first question is, many people have great ideas but struggle to turn them into repeatable systems. What's your process for turning chaos into order when you first start working with the business?
Well, when I go to work with another company you're talking about?
Well, I think this goes across all platforms. As an example, in your business executive errands, I think sometimes, stop me if I'm wrong, but sometimes you probably have a new client that comes on and they're not real organized. There might be a little chaos there, not pointing any one particular client out, but you bring in that policies and procedures and organization that you have and really make it run like a fine-tuned engine. Or you might be coaching somebody, either one of those I think are relevant.
Okay. Well, you know, there is the only way to control the quality of your business and to make sure that you are uh, providing consistent uh, integrity and I'm using the words too many times. I just got back from vacation, so I'm a little bit fuzzy. So hang with me a minute. The only way to ensure consistency in your business is to have written policies and procedures so that everybody operates exactly the same. And for us, that's an order winner. You know, there's order qualifiers out there. Clients are looking for. They're looking for good reputation. They're looking for customer service. They're looking for good quality services or products. But to win in the everything's so competitive that you have to have something that sets you apart. For us, the number one thing that sets us apart is written policies and procedures. And I tell every potential new client that we have them, because what does that show? That shows a dedication to your business. It shows that you are aware that you have to document how you do business so that you can create that consistency. And they always very much appreciate it. There's so many companies out there that work by the seat of their pants and don't, every time something is a little bit different. And for us, it's always exactly the same. So that's, now if I go in and work with a new company and I say, tell me about your processes, and they struggle to be able to tell me what they do every day, then we know we have an opportunity to develop policies and procedures for that business. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I had somebody who called me and said, we had a problem at a client's house, and these are the steps that I took. And they weren't wrong, but they weren't the best steps to protect their business from liability in the long run. So we went over a better process, and I sent her actually my written policies and procedures for her particular situation so that she could take a look at those and maybe adapt or adopt those for her company.
Well, when somebody is struggling to put policy procedures into place, what do you tell them? Like, if somebody's starting out a business and you look at it and it is very chaotic because there's no repeatable systems in place, people are just doing things, if you will, by the seat of their pants. How do you start that process with them? That's really more what we're looking for here in this question.
Okay, I'm sorry. So what I ask them is, what things do you do all the time? That's the first thing you want to look at. What opportunities are there to document your process? So you're looking for the things that you do every single day over and over and over again. And usually this is most applicable policies and procedures are always applicable. But when you have somebody who's running a solopreneur business and they do all the work, and now they've grown to the point where they need to bring on help and assistance, they need to transfer how they do things to somebody else, right? You want to be able to communicate effectively how you do what you do, so that you want to make your success repeatable for other employees. And so the first thing you want to do is document which things you do all the time and how you do them. Most people have a tendency to leave out some of what they do when they're describing their process, because they assume that part of it is intuitive. It's never intuitive. It needs to be absolutely idiot proof. And when I say that, I don't mean to insult anybody. I just mean that I can do a lot of things, but I'm not a mind reader. And neither are the people that work for you that you bring in for help. So you have to define every single little step and how you think about it and why you do those steps to help that person understand the purpose of the process, why you do it this way, what outcome you're looking for, and how that you got there. That way, you are going to eliminate the opportunity for mistakes in that particular process. Does that answer your question a little bit better?
Yeah, that's better. It's sometimes, and I think this is something I always admired about you, because it's somebody, if someone was working for you, taking care of your customers, and then that person left, or let's say they're on vacation and one of your other people stepped in, the end user, your client, didn't know the difference because of your policies and procedures. And it reminds me of being I was in a talk one time, and everybody was given, there were like probably 50 of us in the room, and everyone was given a piece of paper, just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And we all had to stand up and turn around. And then the presenter, he just chose somebody randomly and tell us how to make a paper airplane. And it was quite interesting when we turned around and we compared our airplanes, is what we interpreted that person was saying. And so to me, it's like what you're saying is you have to get it where no matter who it is, a bright 7-year-old could follow the process and procedure that you've laid out. Is that fair to say?
That's totally fair to say. That's how you test a procedure, is that you give it to somebody who's never done it before and say, go through this and let's see if we get to the right result. If they have difficulty in any aspect of that process flow, or if the result is wrong for what you're trying to accomplish, doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means for the end goal, what you're trying to accomplish, then you know that the procedure is not clear enough and not complete enough. So when you, and now if we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's how you test whether a procedure is effective, is if somebody that you don't even know, I could take somebody who's never even heard of executive errands and sit them down with a procedure and say, tell me, show me how we do this process. Now, keep in mind, there are kind of esoteric processes, and there's also hardcore detailed processes. And what I mean by that is we use the other order winner that we have is the software system, essential elements that we use to run the business. So we have procedures for using the software, which is more of a hard detailed process. You go to this screen, you enter this data, you interpret it this way, this is what it's doing, this is how you get there. Versus for example, if somebody wants to donate household furniture and goods, right? We have a process for that, about who we contact to see if we can consign it, asking them what charity do they have a preference for, do they want a receipt for that? So those are more esoteric in my mind processes versus the detailed data-driven processes where you've got a screen and you've got fields to fill in, and so you've got to do that. So we have both because we do both of those things, and most companies do both. I'm sure it's the same for you, right? You've got if somebody's editing a video, for example, some of that is subjective and kind of based on their experience with how things look, right? And other things are, this is how the software application is that we're using and what data you put in there and how you work with that. That's a fair comparison, I think.
Absolutely. It seems like the part about turning chaos into order, could chaos be that situation where maybe they say, oh yeah, I have policies and procedures. And then you see them at work and you see two employees doing the same process totally different.
Yeah, you can't have that.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
that when you kind of dig in and say, well, let's look at what you have. And so there's no room for misinterpretation.
Yeah, I used to do that all the time when I worked as a consultant in aerospace. We would do an as is analysis and then do a to be recommended configuration for that process, because everybody needs to do it exactly the same. Otherwise, if you allow individuals to interject their own opinions and philosophy into the process, the outcome could vary. And what you don't want is to have a situation where the client sees an inconsistency in the way employee A versus employee B does it. And that's one of my selling things. I tell my potential clients that we have written policies and procedures. Everybody does everything exactly the same, all the way down to the verbiage and how we write emails, believe it or not. I mean, all of it is exactly the same. And then the only difference they will see if we have to substitute somebody in because somebody's on vacation or somebody's ill is the name at the bottom of the alert they get that says, hey, we did something for you. It'll have a different person's name on it. But as far as the way it reads, as far as the way the time is entered, as far as the email they receive, everything is the same. And you need that. Yeah, you need that, because what you don't want in your business, and I don't care if you're selling widgets or you're providing a service, you don't want inconsistency and you don't want your quality to suffer. When somebody's been doing the work themselves all along, they've built a reputation, they've built quality based on how they do something. Now you've got to get somebody else to do it like you do, and human beings want to do things their own way. And that can be part of the initial training challenge when you hire a new person and you have to train them. It's funny because depending on the industry the employee comes from, the training has to vary. If I hire an academic, they're great rule followers and they understand policies and procedures. Or if I hire somebody with a financial background, they also understand rules and policies and procedures. If I were to hire a real estate agent or a marketing person, they're coming from a background where they're supposed to be very affable and friendly and talkative and kind of schmoozing, right? That's their business. They are building relationships so they can get more business out of that person. I want my employees to be building the relationship with my company and not with them. So that makes my company more valuable. So then if I have to swap somebody in or out, my customers understand that it doesn't really matter who they have because everything is going to be the same.
Well, I remember back in the day when I was in the golf industry and I would explain to my staff, I said, what you're just saying is it's really you work for the company. So everything you do reflects on the company, except when you do something really good, they remember your name. When they do something really bad, they remember our name, meaning our company name. So the goal is to reduce and hopefully eliminate the bad instances. And so that was something we did. Last night, we talked about policy and procedure. Actually, 2 nights ago, we went to a restaurant for dinner. And when we used to go, it was one of those things you could depend on. It was always good food. And as we left there, the four of us who we've been dining at this place for 5 or 6 years, we all looked at each other going, wow, that was terrible.
Wow, really?
Well, it was like simple things like when we sat down, just the silverware, the place settings were all inconsistently different. Some of us I had a butter knife. Everybody else had a sharp knife. One person had a spoon and a fork and no knife. It was inconsistent, the whole setup. And it was like that all the way through. And then when they sent our food out, it was like, really? And the excuse was, well, that's the way our pizza oven is. And like, well, then you should take this freaking pizza off of the menu, because if your pizza oven this is what it puts out, this is reflecting badly on your business. Like we all said, we'll never go back. And we've been clients of theirs for 5 or 6, like I said, probably 5 or 6 years. And I almost feel like I need to step in because I know the owner and say, hey, I just want to share some things with you. And I don't want you to take it badly. I want you to look at it as an opportunity to fine tune things. But
It's oh, good.
if I see this, I'm sure everyone who leaves there goes, wow, the food was substandard. The help was great, but I didn't even get a fork with my knife and napkin.
Right. Yeah. And then instantly what comes in my mind is they need a procedure for calibration of that oven, right? You have to calibrate ovens or scales every so often. In the restaurant business, they use scales. They measure how many ounces of hamburger or how much cheese or whatever it is that they're doing. They use scales all the time. So you have to calibrate those. So there needs a procedure for how to calibrate, who to call to do that. And then B, you need a procedure for frequency of when, or included in the same procedure, what's the frequency that we calibrate? Because that's exactly what's wrong with the oven. I can guarantee you, I don't even work with restaurants that much, but I can absolutely guarantee you that the calibration is off on the oven. And so it's either overheating or underheating, or it's inconsistent in the process of cooking the pizza. And so right away, I can tell they need a procedure right away.
Yeah.
Same with the setting up of the tables. The table settings need to be identified as this is what goes out there. 2 forks, a knife, a spoon, a butter knife, a glass for wine, a glass for water. There's certain things that have to be on that table setting, and you say, well, that's kind of nitpicky. Well, actually, especially these days when the turnover of employees is so great since COVID, as you know, if you can find people to work for you, they generally have little experience. And so you have to really spend time teaching them, and teaching them how to do a place setting seems so mundane, but I can guarantee you there are Gen Zers out there that have never had, and was it Emily Dickinson that used to, is it Emily, who used to do the etiquette?
Yeah, I think that was,
it,
I think that,
was it,
I think it was Emily Dickinson. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the right name, but Emily Post, maybe Emily Post. She used to do etiquette classes, and that included how to set a table. And so, these kids, and I hate to blame it on kids. It's not kids. It could be adults that are coming back into the workforce. It could be anybody. They may not know what you expect how your table to be set. We just got back from vacation, as you know, right? And we were on a cruise, and they have buffet restaurants, and they have sit down fancy restaurants on the cruise ship. And so most of the time we just use the buffet, but we went to one of the really nice steakhouses. And when you sit down, that's exactly how it is. They take your napkin and they lay it in your lap for you, right? And then they ask if you want wine. If you don't, they take those glasses off the table so you have more space. And you have the forks, or you have a salad fork and a dinner fork and a steak knife and a spoon, and there's a butter knife on the butter dish, and there's all these things. If you don't tell somebody how you want that table set, they aren't going to do it that way. And then you get the inconsistency. I know we're kind of belaboring the table, but it's such a good example of how the process can vary simply because you didn't communicate to the employee how you want it to be.
Well,
and that's all it comes out down to.
Yeah, my concern is in this particular business is, we only saw the front end on one table. What's going on behind the scenes? What's going on in the kitchen? Is it as chaotic in there as our table was?
It'd have to be. It'd
have to be. So that's one of those opportunities. Like, you'd love to help them, but it could be one of those things where I hope I'm wrong, that all of a sudden we turn around and said, oh no, that place is closed, because we just are not going to pay the kind of prices they're expecting and just have sub-level, a subpar food and an experience. We're just not going to do that. And there's too many other choices out there. But anyway, so
I wanted to say too, I'm not sorry for interrupting you. I interrupt you all the time. So I'm just going to do it.
It's a talent, folks. It's a talent.
So it's being female. It's my XX chromosomes. I'm sorry. What I was going to say is that a lot of people, you probably never noticed the table setting before when you were in there because it was always right. So you just never,
Yes.
it's one of those things where when the process works, it's transparent
Mm,
to the client or the customer, right? It's
absolutely.
transparent to them. It's when you deviate from that that they notice it.
Yeah.
And so, and I tell that to my new hires all the time or in my staff meetings. I'm like, no question is a bad question. And I'm okay if you make mistakes. Just please don't make mistakes that we already have procedures for. I love to write procedures. So make a new mistake and I'll write a new procedure for it. My office manager gets really annoyed. We do not need another procedure. Yes, we do. If somebody makes a mistake, then you need a procedure for it. That's your other kind of baseline is if there's a mistake, then you need one.
Well, the other thing is, as you say, it's like it almost becomes like a snowball going down the hill. Like one thing you notice, then it causes you to notice another thing. And all of a sudden the focus goes from let's have a really nice evening dinner to we're actually critiquing it at a different level every time something comes out, to the point where when we got our dessert, it was supposed to be creamy gelato and it
Yeah.
tasted like it had grain in it. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like, it was very grainy. I'm like, oh my gosh, I asked my wife, I said, is this the way it's supposed to be? She said, absolutely not. And, but again, so policies and procedures, that's how you would start working with that. I've got another question for you because
Mhm.
this is not a 3-day show. Um,
Go ahead.
so, I think you built a career, and I've been fortunate to be around you now for,
Uh,
almost 2 decades,
yeah.
and you build a career structure around structure and efficiency. Where do you think that gift for organization and systems came from, and how has it evolved over time?
Well, it definitely came from my experience in manufacturing, right? I have a strong corporate background, and so I started out working on a line, soldering, literally soldering circuit boards, and then I moved into the stockroom doing pulling kits and dealing with parts and testing parts and things like that. And then into inspecting what other people were doing, and then into planning. And I'm really condensing this into planning and then into supervision and so on. So, um, when you work in a corporate environment, especially one that has so many moving parts, you have to understand how each of those work and how they relate to every other section of the business. And then it's obviously, at least in my brain, it's obvious that you need to do things as efficiently as possible. And as you know, I believe in management by exception. So um, I don't like recurring tasks because it's a waste of time, right? I want to do something, do it one time and be done with it. So many people get stuck in doing the same repetitive thing over and over again. So I'm like, how do we eliminate the repetition? And two is there is no reason to focus on everything in a business. What the focus needs to be is on the exceptions, which is again why I have policies and procedures. I am looking for what were the exceptions? Well, so and so made a mistake over here. Well, why did they make that mistake? Because people are good and they want to do a good job. They're inherently good. So why did they make the mistake? Well, it could be that they didn't understand what the outcome was supposed to be, or they didn't understand how that process in the computer worked, or it's almost always a process or an education issue when somebody fails, right? It's not because the person is a bad person or they're not a good employee for your company. I really firmly believe in that you have to leverage people's strengths and eliminate their potential for weaknesses, because not all of us are good at everything. So you have to find, and I used to do this all the time. I've led teams up to 200 employees, all the way down to just, 3 or 4. So I've worked with lots and lots of people. Also, as part of that is I used to do software implementations and conversions from homegrown systems into um, formal systems, like you've probably heard of Oracle or SAP or I can't think of another one off the top of my head, but we pre-Y2K, people were working pretty much on homegrown systems, and then we started to transition people into new systems. And when we were doing that, no process is no more important than it is when you're trying to convert somebody from the way we've always done it into a new way. And so I have years and years of experience helping them convert their data, convert their processes, evaluating the process and saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why do we need to do that? The kiss of death is the statement, that's the way we've always done it. And you don't have to do things the way you've always done it. You need to do them efficiently. And so my brain just works that way. I can help somebody through a process and say, okay, eliminate this activity, let's streamline this so that it's more effective and efficient for everybody concerned.
Well, as you mentioned that, I was listening to a psychologist yesterday, and they were talking about performance. And they said, when somebody wants to become a different version of themselves, like their habits have gotten them to here, but it's not going to get them to there. And they discuss, like, it's usually not doing more, it's eliminating the things that are no longer necessary. And that's what I hear you saying.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it is really making it more streamlined. Over time, how has your process to do this evolved? Have you become more efficient at it? You become more like, hey, you're now surgically going in and seeing things that other people go like, I didn't even see that?
Right. Well, let's take my software, for example. Okay. So we started this in 2007. I started my company in 2006. I went live with the first version of the software system, Essential Elements, in 2007. And it was very rudimentary. We just had a place to enter time and to keep track of time. And it did a few things for us and notified us when we need to rebill a client and that sort of thing. But there were a lot of redundant exercises. The employee, for example, would fill out a checklist of things they'd done for the day, which then was automatically emailed to the client. And then they would have to take that same data and enter it in the time entry log in order to track the time that they actually worked. So one was a record of what they'd done. The other one was how much time it took to do that and a regurgitation of what they did. So we did that for years and years. And, and as you grow, those things become more and more cumbersome, and it was redundant. And me, I hate redundant tasks. So, and my employees were complaining about it because they'd say, I'm spending all this time doing data entry and nowhere to charge this effort. So I sat down and I took a look at it and I said, okay, how can I streamline this process? And what I did was I had the software modified so that when we submitted the activity reports, what we call the checklist, it automatically creates a time entry now to with the end time that they finished, and a description of everything that they put on that report is already auto-populated. So it doesn't have to be re-entered. And then all the employee has to do is put a start time and how much total time they worked, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. That cut the time entry down by 89%. So it took them 89% less time to do their data entry because we automated and we eliminated the redundancy of putting in the description, which allowed them then to spend 89% more time focused on the client, right? And eliminated the time that they felt they couldn't bill for because where am I going to put this, right? There's nobody to charge this to except the company, which then cuts into my profit margins, which then makes me unhappy. And so therefore, we have to automate things. And I've done that end over end on so many different processes throughout the software and throughout I'm going to call them the esoteric processes, to eliminate duplication of effort, because the less duplication there is, the more efficient you are, the better your profit margins. And oh my God, I can't talk today. The better your profit margins are at the end of the day.
Well, it sounds like, a lot of times I think there's a mindset of like, okay, I'm going to create my policy and procedures and now it's done.
Oh,
to me, it sounds like you're constantly, it's a living document.
Yes, absolutely. And there should be a procedure for your procedures that say, seriously, this can get out of hand. But remember, I've always worked with corporate companies and aerospace companies, and so they live on out of hand and
Mm.
specifications and procedures. That's their bread and butter. So I've written thousands and thousands of procedures, but you need one that says, what frequency do we review these? Or how often do we review them? What's the process for updating? What's the distribution once you update them? Do I need to retrain people after that? When we did the overhaul on the software last year and completely revamped everything and added all new kinds of features, we had to update almost all of the software procedures to
Wow.
incorporate the new processes and the new efficiencies that were existing in the system. The employees got onto it right away. They didn't have a problem. But what if I hire somebody new in? Or, I license that software to other companies like ours. So they need to be able to have how-to procedures on using the software as well. So, because then I have to train them on how to use it, and they need something that they can tangible have to reinforce the training, right? So yeah, it's a constant review, update process, always.
Well, this next question is absolutely perfect for this because policy procedures can feel overwhelming to a lot of business owners. What's one common misconception you wish you could clear up for them?
This is the exact same thing as I can't delegate because it takes me longer to explain it to somebody than it is for me to do it myself. Okay. Now, the problem with that mentality is you can't ever get out from under your business if you can't delegate. The same with policies and procedures. If you don't make the time to document how you do things and what you expect to be the outcome of those efforts, then you can't ever grow. You become limiting in your company. Your growth and stability suffers because people are human and they're going to want to do the right thing. And if they don't understand how to do it, they're going to do it their own way. And then you've lost all quality and consistency, just like the table setting the other day. Did you have something to eat with? Yes. Right? You had something to eat with. Was it what you expected? No. Can you eat pizza with a spoon? I'm sure you can. Okay. However, I'm sure the owner of the restaurant wants his tables laid out a certain way because it creates a perception of value, right?
Mm.
And once you lose that perception of value, the client or the customer start nitpicking, which is exactly what you guys did. That is also human nature, right? If you have a client who's 100% satisfied when they walk in the door, but then they find one little thing is not to their satisfaction, all of a sudden the rest of it is crap because they start looking at it. Was the gelato as smooth as it could be? Maybe, maybe not. But would you have noticed it as much if you hadn't had the other aggravation of the pizza that was either undone or overdone and that didn't have the right utensils and whatever? You probably wouldn't have been that put off by a little bit of grainy gelato, and you would have probably come back. But right now, all of it together is like these people have lost their mojo, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. So as far as overwhelming goes, yes, it can feel overwhelming in the beginning, but that's why you come to people like myself or like you who have done zillions of these things, literally zillions. Okay. I've been in business now for 40 years. And so, oh my God, I'm getting so old. And so, and I have written thousands and thousands of procedures for all different kinds of companies. The reason I know the calibration is off on the pizza oven is not because I'm a pizza oven wizard, but because when I taught 5 semesters at Cal State Northridge, teaching continuing education of operations management to tired, bored adults who worked all day and then had to come listen to me talk. And one of them made bagels, and their recipe for their bagels was constantly faltering, and they were having trouble with the elasticity and getting them to come out right or them being flat or whatnot. And it turned out it was the calibration of the scale that they measured the flour on for the bagels.
Interesting.
Because people that cook for a living, right, they do almost everything by weight. They don't, because things settle. I don't know if you cook at all, Jeff, but if you scoop flour out of a container, it will have compacted and settled. And so you may get more in that cup than you intended. Whereas if you stir it up and get some air in there and then scoop it up and measure it or weigh it, then you're going to get exactly the right amount. And so that's why I know the pizza oven calibration is off. That's just how that works.
Interesting. Well, I think that's a good point. To me, when I see this, policy procedures can feel overwhelming. To me, it's like when you feel like your business is overwhelming and you don't feel like you can grow, and you need to take a look and say, well, do I have policies, procedures in place? Even if it's just me, that can allow me to say, let me make my first hire and not have to now like do their job too, because I can say, here it is, and I can train off of that.
Right.
And all of a sudden the overwhelm starts to go down when that happens. So I think that, as you're talking about this, the first sign is if you're having trouble growing, I think you definitely need to look and say, do you have policy procedures that can say the things that you're doing? Have you written it down? Have you given it a step-by-step process so that in a bright 7-year-old, I'll use that as an example, could do what you're talking about? If not, that may be that, hey, maybe spend an extra hour, like you said, with your staff who was doing it and then saved 89%, in time by redoing it. Wow. Wouldn't we all like 89% more time back or reduction in an effort? Absolutely.
Well, there's just absolutely no, and there's no reason to do redundant efforts. When I look at other people's software systems, because sometimes I'm trying to market my software system because it's efficient, it's effective, it's built specifically for the lifestyle management industry. But some people go and get other things that are generic and not built for it. So now they've got to band-aid the processes together. And they find that they're having to re-enter the same data over and over again. And there really isn't any reason to do that. And I can tell you for a fact that policies and procedures are one of those things that business owners, and we all wear a lot of hats when we first get started, especially, but even as our business grows, and if you don't go back and revisit, I was guilty of that. I didn't go back and revisit things until the complaints from my employees got so loud. Or from my licensees were complaining about, I need this ability, I need this ability, I need this ability, that I went back and looked at it and said, you're right. So people will leave policies and procedures to the very last thing. But what it does is it ends up forcing them to continue to work in their business instead of on their business for way longer. Writing policies and procedures is working on your business. Doing the work yourself or dealing with and doing damage control because somebody didn't understand what you wanted or how you wanted it done is working in your business. And so as you know, I'm a huge advocate for working on and not in. And so you just can't ever escape the jail of your business if you can't get out of it and get on top of it, if that makes sense.
That's perfect sense. I like that. Working on your business, not in your business, and your policy procedures allow you to escape the jail. I love that. That's a tweetable right there, folks. All right, so let's take another. Tell me about the time when a company you worked with had no systems in place. What was the first thing you looked for, and how did you begin to create structure? And this could go back into your aerospace days.
Yeah, I was a consultant for 10 of those years, right? So I walked into companies I didn't know right off the bat. And it was interesting because the first thing I would say to people when I walked in the door is, if you could have anything you wanted to make your job easier, what would it be? And invariably they would say, oh, there's a couple of things, but you can't make that happen. And I'm like, well, let me be the judge of that. Tell me what you need. And I would say 100% of the time, and that's a big statement, 100% of the time, I was able to take and retool their process and then document it and retrain to give them what they wanted. Now, sometimes that required reporting tools that made their visibility, improved their visibility to what they were working on better. Sometimes it was literally eliminating steps in the process. Hang on one second. Sorry. Other times it was starting from scratch and just building it all. Now, I can also tell you that when I would walk into a company in the beginning, they would say to me invariably, they would say, "You don't understand my business. You don't know what it's like here and how these people operate." Then usually the line people are like rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh my God, management has no clue at how difficult this is." And so I did a presentation called Common Complaints. And before I would try to do anything with a new company, I would sit them down, all the key players, and say, "Let me tell you about your business." And I would go through common complaints that I would get at every single business. And you would see one by one the heads around the table start nodding, because business is business. Okay. There is really only one way to run a business. People are going to argue with me about that. I'm fine with that. But there really is kind of a path through a business, and the steps you need to take to make it efficient and be successful. And so these people, once they saw that I understood, one of the very first things that a company is broken, I've said this for 30 years, is that people are having meetings at lunchtime. To me, that is the epitome of a broken company. You should not be able to have meetings over lunch because you can't fit them in any other time. That's ridiculous to me. So, quite often I would have to start from scratch in these companies. They had process, but they were just haphazard. This person did it this way, this one did it that way. They didn't know why they were doing what they were doing. That's another key piece of this, is educating people to understand the inputs and the outputs of what they're doing. And again, it doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, if it's service, if it's retail, it doesn't matter. All of us have certain tasks we do throughout the day, and you have to understand why you're doing those tasks and who your customer is. And I'm not talking about the end customer, the person that ultimately gets the widget or gets the service. I'm talking about the next person in your own company that has to use whatever you just completed. Right? It could be a circuit board. I'm building circuit boards and I'm putting in parts, and the next person has to solder them. And so you want to make sure all the parts sit flush, so that when they solder it, all the parts look neat and tidy and they don't have to keep getting cold joints and things like that. Or it could be that you're doing paperwork for somebody, and the next person needs it a certain way, or a certain amount of paperwork, or certain documents, or whatever. And so understanding them as your customer, ultimately it reaches your end customer, right? And streamlines the process. People make better decisions when they understand why they're doing something, and what the person before them did and what the person after them is going to do. They make much better decisions. So training them and teaching them I don't know if I've got sidetracked, but this all kind of goes together.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. The idea of, hey, first walking in and asking it, if you had excuse my expression, if you had a magic wand and you could change things within your specific position to make it better, what would they be? And then when they say, "Oh, that'll never happen," you say, "Well, what if?" And you're able to. So what'd you say? Almost 100% of the time, you're able to actually make those things happen. Yeah, give them that.
And I do that today in my own business. Even though we have dozens of policies and procedures, and I have great employees, and they rarely make mistakes, knock on wood, I still from time to time sit them down and say, "What would make your job easier? What do you need?" Do you know that when I first started with Executive Errands, I never built it for me to go do the work. I was trying to build a company, right?
Not from day one.
From day one. So I never went out and did the home checks. I never ran the errands. That wasn't the point of me building this company. I hired somebody the minute I got one client, which is not the way most people operate, but that's how I did it, because I had a vision and I wanted to achieve that. And so where was I going with this? Oh, it wasn't until one of my people got sick and I had to go do the work. It's kind of like undercover boss. I had to go do the work, right? That I found out that all this time, the street address for the clients that they had to go to that day was not on the paperwork that they had.
Mm.
So they were having to stop and look up the street address to know where they were going, which is ridiculous because it lives in the database where we put in the client, we put in the address, right? So why am I not pulling that data and putting it in a column on the report they're using so that they can see where they have to go? And why am I not sorting it by communities where they're doing the work so they can be efficient and do all the work in the same place at the same time, which is what we did. We went back and did that. So even within your own business, even when you have procedures and you feel like you've got this nailed, there are always going to be opportunities for improvement because as we grow in this world, we deal with more data all the time, right? There's more data, more data, more data. And so and if you think of a computer program as basically an Excel spreadsheet, you can pull the data out of whatever you need it and put it into a format so that it is usable and efficient for you. So I'm always asking that question. What would make your job easier? How can I help? And then I go figure it out. Yeah.
I like it. Well, this next one, this will be the last one. This is part 1 of 2 parts because I have 10 questions I want to ask Leslie about policy procedures. She is the expert at this and how policies and procedures and organization are pillars of success. In your experience, how do solid policies and procedures affect employee morale, customer experience, and overall business growth? And I think these are things that people don't think about. Yeah, we have that in place so it gets done, but how does it affect these 3 areas?
Well, for sure, it affects morale. Nobody likes to fail in their job. Nobody. I don't care who you are, how apathetic you think you might be. Even if this is your very first job, nobody really wants to fail. They all want to do a good job. And so by telling them what your expectations are, they are able to have a higher probability of success in what they're doing than they would have otherwise. Perfect example of that is teaching a kid to make their bed, right? If you got a little kid and you want to teach them to start doing chores and you want to teach them how to make the bed, you need to tell them how to do it and show them what you want. And then as they learn, and you don't be critical, if it's not quite perfect, you get there. As long as they can still sleep in it at night, it should be okay. But you want to help them learn the process so that they can be successful in it. And it makes all employees happy when they know that they're being successful in what they're doing. I had an employee yesterday who last week did a task perfectly. This week, she struggled with the same task. She's still learning. And she thought we were going to fire her because she made a mistake, which we aren't going to do. It's a training issue. So we need to train her. She's not a bad person. She's fully capable of being able to do this job. She's just in the learning phase. And so once I sat her down and explained to her how the process worked and what steps she should be taking and showed her the procedure for it, her morale picked up instantly because she says, I can do that. I understand I can do that. So that really makes a difference. From a customer perspective, customers have, especially these days, boy, things have changed so much in the last 20 years since I've been on my own doing business, and way more than it was 40 years ago when I first started in corporate America. Customers have expectations of instant gratification on almost everything. And they want it right the first time. And they want to know that you are providing quality services and products to them. They expect it. They want it. They don't have any tolerance for less than that. So by having written policies and procedures, and I emphasize the word written because if you don't write this stuff down, it will not stick. It will vary. It just doesn't work the same from a training perspective. All our procedures are available online. All our employees know exactly where to go find them. So we want them to follow them and be able to use them regularly. Customers want to see quality and consistency and credibility in what you're doing. And so when you pitch to them that you have written policies and procedures and everybody operates the same, it gives them a sense of kind of, I don't know if it's relief, but a sense of, oh, okay, they know what they're doing. Okay. And then you have to create a perception of value for clients, no matter what kind of business you have. And because the client perception is the only thing that matters. You can be as good as you ever thought you could be. And if the client doesn't perceive you as good, you are not good. So you have to do that. And so they truly appreciate the attention to detail and the consistency. And a lot of it's subliminal, by the way. When you go in and look at, for example, our data entry that the client sees, because we have full transparency. And so the client sees all of the descriptor, the narrative of what we did for them on a given visit. It all looks the same. So when they pull up their month, for example, and they see, I worked a half an hour and there's this much text for it, or I worked 15 minutes and there's this much text for it, just visually, they get a perception of value. To see the same verbiage used over and over again, they feel like there's quality there and that there's attention to detail. And so policies and procedures help create that perception and enhances the overall experience of your customer. Absolutely 100%, no variation there. You really need them if for no other reason as that. As far as overall business growth goes, just like we talked previously, you can't grow your business if you can't delegate tasks. And if you want to delegate successfully and literally get them off your plate onto somebody else's plate, that person needs to understand clearly what the expectations are, how to do the process, where to find information, who to ask questions to. They need to have all of that. If they don't have that, you cannot grow your business because you can't hire people you can trust to do the work the way you want it done. So it stunts the growth of the business not to be able to delegate to new employees. You just can't grow your business without it. And I've seen people try and they get stuck and it doesn't work. And so, and then they're calling me saying, hey, I'm in trouble. And I say, where's your procedures? Well, I haven't written them yet. Well, then we have to start on that first. That's the first thing we have to do.
It reminds me of when we were talking about this business early on, and when the procedures are not policy and procedures not in place, and it shows at the front of the house, it can something you didn't mention is the overall business growth could be stunted because my review of that business will not be positive, and that will definitely stunt the business growth. Conversely, I'll bet many of your new customers come from your current customers who are raving about you because of the consistency, because of the policy. They don't say, well, because they have policies and procedures. They say they do just such a great job and it's always consistent. In other words, they're the review source.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. If I didn't mention that, then I was remiss, but you're exactly right. Again, it comes down to perception of value, right? People generally only do reviews, or at least it used to be the case. They only did reviews when they were unhappy. I think more now that has moved into a positive way where people do post happy, good reviews on Yahoo and Facebook. And I mean, I've got tons of testimonials on my website. So I know that people do good reviews, but if you want those referrals and you want them to your company, are you sleeping? Am I boring you? Oh, for a minute, your eyes were closed and it just stuck there. Maybe you got frozen for a second. It will stunt your business growth because either in the way I said previously, which is you can't delegate, or in the perception of value by the client. So they don't see you as being a good company. You can talk to your blue in the face about how great you are. It won't matter, and that comes down to, and I know we're not really talking about perception of value, but I lost my train of thought again. Hang on a minute. I'll get it back. You want the client to view your business as professional, right? And having consistency in how you do things creates that professional perception. So you absolutely have to have a way to control what you do. I know it. I know when I say it, it sounds kind of nitpicky, but everything is about the process.
Mm.
People, they have strengths, they have weaknesses. You want to leverage their strengths and put them in a position where they can be successful, because then you have happy employees. And how do you know if they're going to be successful? You need to have a procedure for them to follow to see if they're able to do it. And because I believe in management by exception, I've had people complain over the years that management by exception focuses on what wasn't done and not what got done, right? Because you're looking for why you weren't able to be successful doing something. If you're trying to do on-time delivery, for example, you're shipping widgets out of inventory out the back door to customers, and you only had a 75% on-time delivery. I don't care about the 75% on time. That's what you're supposed to do. I care about the 25% that we did not get out on time. Why? Because I need to know what the root cause of that failure was, so that I can implement a corrective action, so I can reduce the amount that didn't get out on time, so I have more happy customers. So, but the employees, they look at that and say, but you didn't give me a pat on the back for the 75%. Well, yeah, that's your job. You're supposed to do that 75%. But let me find out what in the process broke that meant 25% didn't go. And how do we fix that? Because I know that you want to get it out on time. So what happened? Was there a part shortage? Was there a machine broke down? We used to do in manufacturing, we used to have a machine shop, and sometimes the drill press or the one of the saws or something would break. Bad quality, and you had to send them back to the vendor, and now you had that shortage and you couldn't complete the assembly. There's all kinds of reasons for why a process fails, and you have to find out what those are, and then what can you do to fix them. This comes under the heading of continuous process improvement. We've all heard that initiative over the years. I assume you have, if you've worked at all in corporate America. I've been on my own for so long, I don't even know if corporate America has changed, actually. Although I can tell you that my sister, who worked for one of the major banks that you would recognize if I mentioned it to you, for 35 years, finally begged them to give her a golden parachute and let her retire, because she got so sick of new management coming in, wanting to do the same improvement initiatives year after year after year, and not seeing any results of those. And why was there no results? Because there was no documentation and procedures to change the process for the long term. That's why. So that's what happens.
Yeah, I think first of all, this has been a great conversation. I think it's like an advanced masterclass on understanding how to build that proper foundation of your business. And the cool part about this is if you don't have this foundation, it's not like you got to tear the house down. You can go back and rebuild this. Will only strengthen everything above it, and that's how policies, procedures, and organizations are pillars of success. That's what we're talking about today. This is part one. Leslie, I just want to thank you for sharing and really, kind of coming off vacation and jumping right back into the fire and delivering the fire. I thought that was really good today.
Thank you. This passion project of mine, any of this stuff that's business related, I absolutely love it. It's my heart. Executive Errands is a great company, and I love it. And I love what we do for customers all over the valley here. But Concierge Business Solutions is my heart, and being able to help other businesses be successful. And I see you just put up the link for my educational video series, which is called Freedom by Design: How to Build a Business That Runs Without You. Or is that right? Is that Run Without You? I think that's right. That link will get you to that educational series. And it includes a bunch about policies and procedures, but it includes so many other aspects of how to build a successful company and how to learn to work on your business and not in it. Because truly, Being a business owner is like creating a jail cell for yourself. I know you like that. Is that an analogy, metaphor? I don't know what it is, but I know you like it, and it's true, right? How many times have we been stuck, in the little four walls of our business, working late nights, sweating over the small stuff, worried about income coming in, where's the next order coming from? I mean, day after day after day, year after year. And it doesn't have to be like that. There's some amount of that you have to pay your dues for, but you can really build a business that will be successful without you being there every minute. And I just came back from vacation. As we mentioned, I was gone 12 days, 13 days, and I didn't take my laptop. I didn't take my iPad. I checked my email on my phone, but never had to respond to anybody, just kept an eye on it. And everything ran perfectly. So to me, that's success. Okay, because there was a time not so long ago, 5 years ago on Halloween, that was my honeymoon, and I had to take my laptop and I worked the whole time I was gone because I had to, because I was working in my business.
Yeah.
So, and there's no reason to do that. Even me, who's extremely experienced in this stuff, you've known me forever, you know that I know this stuff really well. Even I can fall into that trap. So that's why I did this training course, is so that people didn't have to learn the hard way. Let's do it the easy way.
I love the fact that there would be times I come over and you were waking up from your desk because you pulled an all-nighter.
Yeah, done it a lot.
And you don't do that anymore, to the best of my knowledge.
No,
and,
I don't.
Your life is much different, and your company has continued to flourish. And it seems like it's given you that extra time to improve, I'll say, your delivery rate, with Concierge Business Solutions and creating the program. And, you want to go through this. Here's the thing that I noticed is, and you said this earlier, is business is business. And we all want to, and I say all, we want to say, yeah, but my business is different.
Right, but it's not.
It's not. It's not.
It's
So
not.
I encourage you to go to learn.conciergebusinesssolutions.com and check it out. I think you'll be very happy that you did, and it's a great resource. Leslie, again, I want to thank you. This is part one of how policies, procedures, and organizations are pillars of success. And you've joined us on the Twisted, Bent, and Exhausted Entrepreneur podcast.
Yay.
Leslie, thank you so much. Welcome back, and I'll see you in part two.
All right. Talk to you soon.